wind was howling across the barren ridge, carrying a chill that cut through even the thickest layers of gear. Every sound seemed amplified, the distant echoes of gunfire bouncing off jagged rocks, mixing with the whistle of the storm. And there she was, crouched behind a mound of dirt, barely visible except for the glint of her scope catching the pale morning light. Everyone around her had whispered it wouldn't be possible. A mile, through a windstorm, a shot no sniper had ever taken and survived. She didn't flinch. She never had. Like, subscribe, and click the bell icon for more stories. Her name was Captain Elena Marks, a woman who had spent years in some of the deadliest corners of the world, yet this mission was testing every ounce of skill, patience, and nerve she had. The enemy had entrenched themselves across the valley, using the terrain like a fortress. Her orders were simple on paper but terrifying in reality. Neutralize the target before it slipped behind cover. 1 mile. A distance most snipers would scoff at. A distance where even the slightest miscalculation could mean death. Elena exhaled slowly, letting the cold air fill her lungs. She adjusted her scope and ran the numbers in her head. Wind direction, Coriolis effect, gravity drop, temperature, altitude. Every variable mattered. Every tiny miscalculation could turn the bullet into a wasted whisper against stone. Around her, the team huddled under the meager cover of the ridge, their eyes shifting nervously, trying to hide the doubt that Elena could feel radiating from them. She didn't need their faith. She had her experience. She had her instinct, and she had a target. But this wasn't just about hitting a mark. This was personal. The target had survived attacks before, taking the lives of her comrades and innocent civilians alike. Every second she spent planning the shot, she carried the weight of those losses. Her hands tightened on the rifle. She could hear the faint crackle of the radio, the anxious voices of her team, and the distant thump of artillery. One wrong move and all of them were exposed. Yet in the chaos of war, her mind sharpened, and a calmness settled over her like a shield. She wasn't just going to take the shot. She was going to own it. And when the moment came, the world itself seemed to pause. The camera would follow her eyes, scanning, measuring, and calculating. The impossible distance stretched before her like a challenge written in the wind. But Elena was ready, and in that moment, the impossible didn't stand a chance. The rain began to drizzle, turning the dirt beneath her knees into slick mud. Elena's scope fogged slightly, but she didn't flinch. She had fought through worse conditions. Her mind ran through the mathematics of the shot, her voice barely audible as she whispered to herself, "Wind at 20 knots, gusting at 30, bullet drop, 4 feet, Coriolis shift, right to left." Every calculation was a brush stroke, painting a portrait of death. Her finger hovered above the trigger, feeling the pulse of anticipation. Around her, the team's chatter was hushed, but relentless. Some were whispering prayers, others debating angles and approaches, but Elena blocked it all out. This was between her and the target. She visualized the trajectory, imagining the bullet slicing through the storm like a knife through silk. A sniper's discipline wasn't just in aim, it was in patience, in the ability to wait, to watch, to listen. And she had waited, and she had watched. The enemy was moving, repositioning as though they sensed her. A patrol, careless but lethal, skirted along the ridgeline 1,000 yards below. Elena held her breath. One false twitch of the trigger, one misread gust of wind, and it would be over. Not just for the target, but for her entire team. The storm whipped around her, rain stinging her cheeks, and for a moment, the world blurred into shades of gray. Then she refocused. She had been trained for extremes, but this test wasn't in the manual. Snipers were taught to calculate angles and ranges, but no one could teach a sniper how to conquer fear. Her heart pounded, but not from anxiety. It was adrenaline, pure and unfiltered. Every second stretched longer than the last. She shifted slightly, her elbow digging into the mud, adjusting for the slope, and the camera would follow her movements in tight, deliberate frames. This wasn't luck. It wasn't instinct alone. This was years of sacrifice, discipline, and countless nights spent in solitude, perfecting the art of distance. Elena's lips pressed together as she muttered one final check. The storm was her enemy and her ally. The distance mocked her. And yet, as the enemy moved into perfect view, she knew the moment had come. And then, a gust of wind howled, violent and unpredictable. It threatened to knock the shot off course. For a heartbeat, doubt flickered. But Elena's gaze sharpened. The camera would catch the sweat on her brow, the tight grip of her gloves. The impossible was about to happen. The wind tore at her face, whipping rain into her eyes, and yet Elena remained perfectly still. Every muscle coiled like a spring, every sense honed to the smallest detail. The target had paused, unaware that death was watching from a mile away. Elena's scope trembled slightly in her grip, but she countered the movement, steadying the rifle against her shoulder. Her mind raced, calculating bullet drop and drift, the shifting wind patterns, and the minuscule vibration from her heartbeat. Behind her, the radio buzzed faintly. "Elena, are you in position?" her teammate whispered, voice tight with tension. She barely nodded, even though they couldn't see her, letting them know without giving away her focus. The world had narrowed to the viewfinder, to the target's profile framed against the gray valley. Every raindrop that struck the barrel, every gust that tried to throw her aim off, became part of the challenge. Elena's memory flickered to training exercises in deserts, mountains, and frozen rivers. Each scenario had been designed to break her confidence, to test if she could handle the impossible. And each time, she had emerged sharper, faster, more precise. But this was unlike anything she had faced. The windstorm howled like a living thing, threatening to erase the line between hunter and prey. She felt a flash of doubt, a whisper in the back of her mind telling her the shot couldn't be made. But she pushed it aside. Doubt had no place in a sniper's mind. Her fingers tightened on the trigger. She could feel the weight of her team's lives, the lives of innocent civilians, and the shadows of fallen comrades pressing down on her. This mission wasn't just numbers on a piece of paper. It was vengeance, justice, and survival all wrapped into one impossible shot. Elena inhaled, slow and controlled, visualizing the bullet arcing perfectly through the storm. The camera would linger on her eyes now, fierce, unwavering, scanning, calculating. And then, movement. The target shifted, pausing under a broken tree line. It was a fleeting moment, a second that could decide everything. Elena adjusted for wind, for distance, for the impossibility of what she was about to do. Time seemed to stretch, each heartbeat echoing louder than the storm. The sniper's mantra ran through her mind: patience, precision, perfection. She pressed her lips together, squeezed the trigger, and felt the rifle jump softly in her hands. And just like that, the bullet left her barrel, cutting across the valley with deadly intent. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The storm swallowed sound, light, and hope. Elena's eyes never left the scope, tracking the invisible arc of the bullet as it defied every expectation. She could feel her heartbeat in her ears, a drum of tension that matched the rhythm of the wind. The entire ridge seemed to hold its breath. Even the team behind her fell silent, sensing the magnitude of what had just been attempted. 1 mile. Through a windstorm. Every expert had said it was impossible, and yet Elena had made the shot. She didn't celebrate. There was no cheering, no relief. The sniper's job was not about emotion. It was about results. But inside, a flicker of triumph burned. She had stared down the storm, the distance, and the impossible, and she had not wavered. The bullet hit. She saw the slight shudder of the target in her scope, the momentary pause before the enemy fell. And then reality rushed back in. The wind, the rain, the danger was far from over. The team still had to extract, the enemy reinforcements were closing in, and every second counted. Elena lowered her rifle slightly, scanning for threats, every sense screaming alert. The shot was perfect, but the mission was not complete. Her legs ached, her back burned from the hours spent crouched in mud and rain, but she moved with deliberate precision. Every step was calculated, avoiding detection, blending with the environment. Her teammates followed her silently, shadows moving across the ridge as the storm raged. She knew the enemy would be relentless, hunting for the sniper who had just defied their expectations. And Elena had no intention of being caught. The camera would catch her silhouette against the gray horizon, rain streaming down her face, rifle in hand, every movement purposeful. She was exhaustion and focus in the same body, a paradox of strength and vulnerability. And yet, in the quiet of her mind, a single thought repeated, "The impossible is only impossible until someone does it." And then a distant roar of engines reached her ears. Reinforcements. The storm couldn't hide them, and they were coming fast. Elena's pulse quickened. She had accomplished the impossible, but survival meant moving faster than anyone expected. The ridge was a battlefield of mud and stone, the storm still battering everything in sight. Elena led her team down a treacherous path, each step measured, careful, almost ceremonial in its precision. The enemy had realized what had happened, and the valley was alive with movement, shouts, distant gunfire, and the echo of engines. Her rifle was still in her hands, ready to act at a moment's notice. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every gust of wind could mask an attack. Elena's mind ran through possibilities like a chessboard, predicting movement, analyzing cover, calculating risk. And through it all, she kept her eyes forward, unwavering. The team followed her lead, their trust implicit, their reliance on her skill absolute. She had just taken a shot no one else could have, and now she carried them all through the storm, like a shepherd guarding sheep against unseen predators. The extraction point came into view, an abandoned helipad half buried in snow and mud, barely recognizable through the sheets of rain. Elena scanned, confirming security, ensuring no ambush. Her hands were steady despite fatigue, every motion disciplined. Her team gathered behind her, tense but relieved to be so close to safety. But even as the helicopter's blades began to churn, the wind and rain complicating every second of approach, Elena's mind never rested. The enemy could strike until the very last moment, and she was ready. Rifle up, eyes sharp, every sense stretched to the limit. She had faced impossible odds once today. She would do it again if necessary. And then, the helicopter landed. Rotors slicing through the storm, sending mud and water flying. Elena's team moved swiftly, but her gaze stayed locked on the horizon. 1 mile, one impossible shot. And yet, in her chest, a strange mixture of relief, pride, and exhaustion settled. She had done what no one else could. She had survived, and she had won. But as the camera would linger on her face, framed by rain-soaked hair and grit-streaked cheeks, it was clear. The mission was only half the story. The personal cost, the weight of every life she had carried, and the quiet burden of the impossible would follow her long after the storm had passed. The helicopter lifted off, blades chopping through the remnants of the storm, scattering mud and debris across the ridge. Elena leaned back against the seat, rifle still in hand, and let herself exhale for the first time in hours. The tension that had coiled her muscles like steel slowly loosened, but her mind refused to quiet. 1 mile, one impossible shot. She had done what everyone said couldn't be done, and yet the weight of it pressed down on her like the storm itself. Her team murmured words of praise and disbelief, but Elena barely heard them. Their voices sounded distant, muffled by adrenaline and fatigue. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the roar of the rotors fill the silence she hadn't realized she craved. Memories of the day flashed in her mind. Mud-soaked hours on the ridge, raindrops stinging her skin, the shiver of the rifle under her grip as she adjusted for wind and distance. Every calculation, every second, had been a testament to discipline, courage, and an unflinching will. Yet it wasn't victory alone that filled her thoughts. There was sorrow, too. Faces of fallen comrades, lives lost to missions like these, haunted her. Every successful shot carried with it the echoes of sacrifice, and Elena felt their weight acutely. She had been trained to handle fear, exhaustion, and even death, but carrying the responsibility of others' lives was a burden no training could erase. The helicopter swayed as it climbed higher, clouds parting slightly to reveal a pale morning sky. In that fleeting light, she let herself acknowledge a rare truth. She was proud. Not for the fame of the shot, not for defying the impossible, but for holding true to her mission, for honoring those she had sworn to protect. The storm was behind them now, but its lessons lingered. Elena's hands remained steady, even in relief, and her eyes, scanning the horizon, never lost their sharpness. She had seen what others would not see, the fragility of life and the power of determination. And she knew, deep down, that the impossible wasn't a boundary. It was a challenge, waiting for someone willing enough to face it. As the helicopter flew toward safety, the camera would linger on her face, water-streaked and dirt-smeared, yet resolute. She was more than a soldier, more than a sniper. She was a guardian, a witness, and a force of nature in human form. And the world had just watched her defy its limits. Back at base, Elena's team filed reports while she cleaned her rifle with methodical precision. Her hands moved automatically, muscles memorizing each motion, but her mind drifted to the shot. The impossible trajectory, the split-second adjustments, the wind as both adversary and ally. Every movement replayed in her mind like a cinematic loop. The target had fallen. The mission was complete. But the personal resonance of that day would echo far beyond any medal or commendation. Her commanding officer approached, a rare mixture of awe and disbelief in his eyes. "Marks, 1 mile, through a storm. You didn't just take a shot. You rewrote the standard," he said quietly. Elena nodded, saying nothing. Recognition was not her pursuit. She had done her duty, yet in the silent pride of her team, in the respect that hung in the air, she allowed herself a small moment of acknowledgement. That night, Elena stood alone on the perimeter, staring at the stars through a sky still streaked with rain. Memories of fallen comrades and the weight of the impossible filled her chest. She thought of the lives she had touched, the lives she had saved, and the ones she couldn't. The world of a sniper is one of paradox, precision and chaos, patience and urgency, life and death all entwined. And in that space, Elena found a strange serenity. She had faced the impossible, she had prevailed, and she had lived to carry the lessons forward. Even as she reflected, she knew that the battlefield never truly left a soldier. The quiet moments were fleeting, the memories of missions, of choices made in seconds that carried consequences for a lifetime, lingered. Yet, through it all, she carried herself with the same quiet determination that had guided her through a storm, through a mile of impossibility, to achieve something few could imagine. Victory has a way of masking sacrifice. Elena walked through the base, observing the subtle effects of war on those around her. Faces lined with exhaustion, eyes haunted by the things they had witnessed. She understood that each of them had taken a personal mile through their own storms. The impossible shot had earned them safety, but the cost, physical, emotional, invisible, remained. She paused by the memorial wall, tracing the names of soldiers who had fallen, comrades whose laughter and courage were now memories. Every name reminded her that precision, skill, and bravery were never solitary acts. They were threads woven into the fabric of countless lives. The shot she had taken wasn't just about defeating a target. It was about protecting those who could not protect themselves, honoring those who never returned, and carrying the weight of responsibility that would never leave her. The camera would follow her fingers tracing the etched names, her face half in shadow, rain-soaked hair falling into her eyes. Elena's heart ached for them, not for herself, not for fame or recognition, but for the profound burden of the life she had chosen. She had survived where others had not. She had faced the impossible and lived. And yet, the memory of those who hadn't lingered like a ghost, a reminder that courage is measured not in victories, but in the resolve to endure loss and continue the fight. And still, despite it all, a flicker of hope glimmered in her eyes. She understood that the impossible wasn't a limit. It was a call to action, a challenge to rise above fear, chaos, and doubt. Elena had answered that call. She had taken the shot. And though the storm had passed, she knew that life's challenges would continue, demanding the same unwavering courage, the same precise determination, and the same unbroken spirit she had shown on that ridge, 1 mile through a windstorm. Days later, the story of the impossible shot had begun to ripple through the ranks. Whispers turned into reports, and reports into briefings, 1 mile, through a windstorm, never missed. Soldiers and commanders alike struggled to believe it, but Elena had done what no one else could. Yet, even as her achievement spread, she remained quiet, almost invisible among the accolades. Recognition was never the goal. Survival, precision, and protecting her team had been the only measures she cared about. Back at the firing range, Elena practiced again. Some might have thought her done, that one impossible shot would be enough to cement her place in history. But for her, the discipline never ended. She studied wind patterns, recalculated trajectories, and adjusted for every possible variable, not out of obsession, but out of respect for the craft and for the lives her skill protected. She knew that perfection could not be an accident. It had to be repeated, practiced, and refined endlessly. And yet, beneath the skill, beneath the unyielding focus, lay something deeper, a quiet humanity. Elena carried the weight of every mission, every life touched by her choices. Her comrades respected her not just for her ability to defy odds, but for the way she shouldered responsibility with unwavering grace. She had seen death, felt its cold fingers brush against her team, and yet she remained unbroken. A living testament to resilience, courage, and precision. The camera would linger on her as she adjusted her rifle, rain now only a memory, sunlight glinting off the barrel, her eyes distant yet fierce. 1 mile, through a windstorm, never missed. The impossible had been rewritten in real time, and the echo of her determination would resonate far beyond the battlefield. And in that quiet intensity, there was a lesson not just for soldiers, but for anyone facing seemingly insurmountable odds. Courage is forged in the storm, and mastery is measured not by luck,